Thank you for attending this morning. I see that most of us, if not all, are in the same time zone, which means that it is 8 a.m. and you are all here and smiling for the most part. So good to see you. We are going to start our session today. But before that, I wanted to just say to be on the lookout. We're looking at adjusting the times and the day of this just to see if there's a better time that works. This time worked for us well in the past, but we wanted to we'll be sending out some information to see if there is a better time or day for individuals to attend these types of sessions. But to move forward, I do believe everyone here knows Peter McGuinn, our instructional technologist. So he will be leading us to cover the topic of gamification and how we might be able to use it in our classes at different levels. So I will pass that over. Thank you so much, Peter.
Okay, thanks for the intro, and I guess I can say good morning, everyone. I was going to say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, but I think we're all good morning. Thank you so much for coming along to this. I'm just going to share my screen here. So I guess, as we all already know, my name is Peter McGuinn. I am the instructional technologist here at Westcliff now, and I want to talk today about games and gamification in learning. So just a quick agenda here. This isn't really much of a slide-based presentation. I want to, as much as possible, talk about this stuff by looking at and working through examples. So I'm going to spend a lot of time outside of the slides and into browser tabs and looking at different examples of gamification. So I do want to start off talking a bit about games. As distinct from gamification. I suppose there's almost like a Venn diagram here. There are games that can be played in education and outside of education. You can gamify things that happen in education without necessarily using games as we traditionally define games, but you can also have games that are gamified. So that'll become more clear as we kind of talk through these things. So then, as I said, I want to look through examples. After we look through some more generic examples, I want to look through some that are specifically in education. And I guess that breaks up into two areas. One is aspirational, so going big, like, really some big, broad examples of gamification. But then I always, in presentations, I want people to have some practical takeaways. I want them to feel like you're going away from here not saying, well, that was cool, but that's impossible. There are some things that you might be able to practically do and use, and maybe we can work together on developing these things. And I do want to leave some time at the end for sharing our own examples and experiences. We've got a lot of experience in this Zoom room right now, and I know that all of you probably have some examples of games and gamification you've used yourself, or colleagues have, or you've seen at other institutions. And so I want to draw that out in the room, because I can share 45 minutes of stuff I know about and worked in and found, but there's a lot more in the room than just me. So I do want to leave some time at the end for that. And just at the bottom there, we're a relatively small group. I welcome any questions, comments, discussion throughout. I'll try to keep us on time as much as I know the timing of this, being the first time I've delivered it. But please feel free to just speak up anywhere as we go through. I don't want it to be just me talking the whole way. So first thing, I'm going to turn over to you guys. What are games? And I'll cover the why, but what in your minds are the kind of core elements of what makes a game a game?
Competition.
Competition, yep. And I've got some bullet points here I'm going to throw out, but I just want to see how much we overlap in our thinking here.
I feel like incentive, even if it's not competition based.
Yeah, incentives. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking about games here that can be played individually, games that maybe are played in groups. It doesn't have to necessarily be gamification yet, but yep.
Fun to some degree, or some kind of a social aspect.
That's a good one. Yep. A game is fun. That's actually really important, and then kind of the first thing we're going to cover here.
Different way to learn, different way to see the tactics.
That's right. Yep. Yeah, games give us the ability to, well, actually, I'll leave that for the moment, because that is an important point. That's going to happen. We're going to see that when when we shift from games to gamification.
There's usually an objective.
That's right, objective. And tied in with objective is something important. Strategy and
rules.
That's the word I was looking for. I was trying not to say it myself. Rules are really important. There has to be a definition of what's going on. It's not just the same amorphous thing that's happening. So what I've got on here, I think we covered most of this. That last one I think is important. They require you to do something, right? It's active. It's not a passive thing, and that's really important in the kind of the psychology of why games and gamification work. I suppose the other one we didn't touch on was separate, having a distinct time and place. That one's a little bit confusing, but I did want to get that in there. Okay, so before we start looking at things, we talked a little bit about fun, right? Why do we like games? What makes a game enjoyable? And for me, there's a lot of different psychology here, and I don't want to get too into the weeds on theory and psychology, but for me, the most important parts are intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. And we see these concepts across lots of things in academia, but basically when it comes to games, if I'm intrinsically motivated, I'm playing the game because I like it, I enjoy it, right? I'm self-motivated from internal reasons. When I'm extrinsically motivated, I'm motivated, I'm not necessarily saying one is better than the other, but I'm motivated by an end goal, right? I want to get a grade, or I want to get to some point. I might not like the process of getting there. The game might not be fun to me, but I am still motivated to get to that end. I guess while we're here on these concepts, I do feel that too much of education is purely extrinsic motivation, right? Students are chasing a grade. They're doing something that maybe they don't like that much, but they are highly motivated. They want to get that grade. They want to finish the course. They want to finish the program. But the process of getting there is a lot of extrinsic motivation. And I think games and gamification present an opportunity to add both intrinsic and different types of extrinsic motivation, right? Okay, so enough theory and enough going into the weeds on that. Got two games here. I don't want to upset anyone, but the game on the left, I don't like, right? And the game on the right, I do like, okay? Monopoly, it's probably the most popular game of the last 100 years, but for me, it's boring, right? It's basically luck-based, right? Those first two goes around the board. If you land on the right spaces and you get to buy them, the game to me is more or less over. And I'm purely extrinsically motivated in this game because it's mostly luck. You know, I'm just trying to get the most money and win, right? In fact, my motivation is probably other things with Monopoly, like spending time with family or things like that. But this other game, Geoguesser, which I'm going to show you now, has anyone played this before? Getting some no's? Good. It's probably better that you haven't, from my purposes. But with Geoguesser, so this is just a game on the web. Everyone knows about Google Maps and the amazing work they've done. And I guess it's about 10 years ago, they started driving those cars around the street with a tall camera sticking off the top. And I saw, wow, they're actually going to take pictures and map every street. I thought that's insane, but they went ahead and did it. Now we've probably all used Google Street View. But what this game does, the rules are really simple. It basically drops you somewhere on Earth as if from space, or imagine if you woke up somewhere from a coma and you look around, and how quickly and how can you determine where you are in the world, right? So I'll just bring up the gameplay really quickly here. Oops, sorry, I'll get to that in a second. There are different maps you can play. So I'm just going to play the whole world, but you can actually narrow down and say, hey, I want to be dropped somewhere in Spain, or I want to be dropped somewhere in the European Union. You can, I'll just show you later on when we talk about education in this, you can create your own maps and just choose places, but I'm just going to play in the world. And there are some settings here. You can have time limits and whether or not you're allowed to move around. There's a challenge mode that I'll show you in a moment. But when I start this game, here I am. Now, anyone have any ideas where I am? I can move around. I can zoom in and look at things. So I'm just using my mouse here to sort of click around. And just off the tops of your heads, what sorts of things might you look for to try to determine where you are anywhere in the world?
Posters on the wall, on the fences.
Very good. Language, right? What's the
Language,
first
yeah.
thing? That's, it's a little bit blurry. I
Area
can't
code.
quite see the language.
French.
Sorry?
Area code and the phone number, I can't tell.
Yep, sometimes that can be helpful. It's a little bit blurry, but yep, you guys are zeroing in right on really quite specific
And
details.
architecture.
Let's say there was no language around.
Architecture.
Very good. Architecture, right? Where do we know we're not? Right off the tops of your head.
US.
Pacoima.
We're not in the
I-
US, absolutely.
I was also going to say Dr. Johnson
Not
would
in
probably
Asia.
look
Oh.
at the foliage and determine what it is.
That's a very good one. Yep, botany.
I mean, there's cars. You can see what side of the road they're driving on.
Excellent. Yep, that's so. I play this game a lot, so I kind of have a really kind of long list in my head about what it is. But yep, left side of the road, right side of the road. So I'm just going to have a guess here. Sorry, I just have to keep moving my little windows around here. Let's say it's somewhere kind of in Eastern Europe, just based on the architecture. And as soon as I click somewhere, I hit my guess button, and it shows me where it really was. Hey, who said France? Who said that was French? Well done, whoever said that. Now it shows me how far away I am. I was 1,355 kilometers, and I get points depending on how close I am. And then I play the next round. It's that simple, right? But the reason I like this game, right, as opposed to Monopoly, is a few things. Number one, it's about problem solving. It allows me to use my internal skills and knowledge to solve these problems, drawing from so many different disciplines, right? Geography, architecture, infrastructure, as we look up here, language skills, cultural awareness. It really pulls in lots of different disciplines. And I get to solve those problems. I'm able to learn, there we go, speed limit 30. 30 what? Kilometers per hour or miles per hour? Probably miles per hour. And then there's a bridge named after somebody. So I can bring in history, I can bring in local knowledge about places, I can draw on travel experience. So a game with really simple rules that can teach multiple disciplines, and it still has all of those elements that we talked about when we talked about games, right? It's got rules, it's got competition, but just among myself. And we'll talk about how this game can be played otherwise in just a moment. I'm just going to guess somewhere in North America. Way off. It turns out to be near Plymouth, just outside of Boston. Okay, so that's kind of the basic rules of Geoguesser. But what I want to do now is show you how this works in education, right? And I'm going to get you guys to play this really quickly. So now this is Geoguesser it has a new education mode, which I've signed up for, and I can create assignments, and I can basically create a version of this game. I could make any map I wanted. So depending on what I'm teaching, I could say, well, I'm teaching brutalist architecture. I can create my own map, dropping pins in places where there's specific types of architecture and get students to sort of determine where those are in the world. So I can customize this in a number of different ways. What I want us to do is, I've got an assignment here I created really quickly. I'm just going to pop this link in the chat, and literally all you have to do is click the link. That's in there now. You don't need an account, you don't need anything, just type in a name. It can be your own name, you can make up a name, and just start playing. There are 5 rounds in any game, so just as quickly as you like, have a look around and have a think about what's going through your mind and what the game experience is like as you do it, and what you're learning and what you're able to learn. And just let me know if you're having any problems. I can see some people are getting in here, so that's good. Now I, as a teacher, can see what's going on here, and I'll leave this on the screen as you guys play. But I guess what we're kind of shifting to here is the idea of a game becoming something gamified. Great, we've got everyone in. So I do want some people to finish all 5 rounds so we can see some scores coming in. So don't get too at that, but do try your best, because I want to see how we all go with this. I see lots of very concentrated faces, which is good.
My first one took me deep into a forest, and there's nothing but forest.
Yeah, those are tough. There are maps that that basically limit where you can be dropped, and they're only in places that have stuff, like, you know, you're at least on the outskirts of some kind of town or city. But yeah, sometimes it can be very challenging to get close. Has anyone been able to finish all 5 rounds?
Almost.
Okay. This is a little bit new to me on the instructor end here, so I'm just
But
when
when we're ready to make a guess, how do we do that?
just click on the map, and then a guess button will light up underneath.
Okay.
Oh, you can only move in certain directions, huh? Or
It depends on where you get dropped, but yeah, you can only sort of move along the lines that the Google car was able to drive. And sometimes it does come to dead ends where they, you know, if you're on a dirt road or something, it just won't go any further. So they decided not to drive down that road.
okay.
All right. Nicholas is in. I'll just wait for 1 or 2 more to get in, so we get something of a leaderboard going.
Ah,
Yeah, no, I think what's interesting and part of this is it's very addictive.
Oh yeah.
I think I could spend my entire day doing this.
yeah.
And wait till I'll show you a couple of other modes which gamify it a little bit more. And as we sort of transition from games to gamification, and you'll see how much more addictive it can get.
Well played, Jen. Well played.
Thanks. I think we'll have to join and play a couple rounds together here.
All right, we've got Jen, we've got Nicholas. I'll let you all keep playing as I guess we start talking through the results here. So you can see I've got a if anyone wants to come back to the presentation, I'm sharing my screen. But just what we're looking at is a traditional leaderboard, right? The results start coming in. So you've been competing against yourself to some extent, like you want to do as well as you can. But then you've also got the other participants here. And I can click on each of these now and I can see your gameplay. And I can see which ones you were way off on and which ones you were close on. So Jen, you actually got most of them pretty close. You got 12,318 points, which is great. So these ones are quite tricky. So maybe if you can talk me through maybe one that you got really close on, like you actually got a lot of Africa, which can be hard. So say this one here in Kenya. What helped you get close there? How did you know?
There was a sign that said Kenya.
Easy. Okay. Words are always the thing you're kind of hunting around for, but if you can't get words, right? That's where it gets tricky. Anything else in Africa?
There was one without words that I really just went, well, 3 of these were already in Africa, so I'm just gonna guess somewhere in Africa. And that was the only one that I couldn't find anything.
Right. Okay. Okay. So we've got some more people, and if we look at Professor Musavi, so you had
so it also seemed that everyone's points were different. So I was thinking everyone's points would be the same, but yeah, it looks like everyone's points were destinations.
Yeah. So there is a way to play it where everyone would get the same map.
Got it.
This mode doesn't do that, but yeah, there is a way to do that where you can multiplayer. I'll show you that. But that's a very good point. In this sense, the rules are a little bit different for each player. But in another way, this gives us a way to talk about different outcomes. So
super cool.
And as I mentioned, I guess you could use this in a lot of different ways. I'm not necessarily promoting using this in education. I'm using it as an example, but I think it does fit into a lot of disciplines, and it works very well in a place like Westcliff, where we have a lot of diversity to draw on, and where even just as icebreaker activities, we kind of learn about the things and experiences that others have. So I really like it from that perspective. From a gamification sense, we do get to see how well we did against others. And I kind of want to shift a little bit into the idea of gamification now.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
With that, when I think you said it, you can pick the locations to set up for students or whoever's going to do it. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah,
so if you were to do, like, if you were teaching a world religions class, you could find like locations with like the specific temples or churches or whatever, and you could click there and then have them do something like, or even art history, something where you could. Okay.
Absolutely. So I can use these official maps. I can look at popular maps. I can search for a map. It probably already exists. Right. World religions, Islam, Judaism. There's so many maps. You probably don't need to create your own, but you could actually click here and say this location is in it, and you could maybe pull together 20 or 30 of them and work it that way. Yeah. And I think that's why they created this education version to some extent, that it's so customizable that you can do that. So I hope that was fun, and I hope we've given you something to do outside of here, a new gameplay. Let's shift into gamification now. And so kind of based on playing a game now and then kind of seeing the results, what are the elements, or what's a definition, I suppose, that you might have of gamification?
An objective to create an inquisitive nature.
If you were going to gamify something,
Scoring. I mean, there'd be scoring. There's rules.
Yep.
To make it fun, to create competition, and to
competition is a good one.
Yeah, to make rules to reach an objective. So to engage the players.
So some of the elements, there's an acronym I didn't know about until I was putting this together. PBL, points, badges, and leaderboards. So, and sometimes people speak positively about that, and sometimes people think it negatively, like, oh, if you just throw some points, badges, and leaderboards at something, it's gamified, which to a certain extent is true. Sometimes that's all you need to do. But it's, for me, it's, and this is kind of a meta definition here that I pulled together from a few different things, but the application of elements of game playing, so what we were talking about before, to other areas of activity that are not traditionally game activities. We're going to look at a few examples of this. But for me, this definition is a little bit too narrow because, as we just saw, we can apply gamification principles to something that is a game, right? It doesn't have to be a non-game activity. But normally when we're talking about gamification, we're talking about adding those elements in to non-game activities. And what do we mean by this, right? We're going back to Monopoly. I didn't do this on purpose, but who remembers this from, gosh, a long time ago, 25 years ago? Now, aside from the fact that it ended in a tremendous scandal, a cheating scandal, right? Eating food is not traditionally a game activity, right? Going to a fast food restaurant. But McDonald's applied a really simple gamification concept to it, and it was remarkably successful, right? I remember having these pieces in a drawer in my house, and I was, we can talk about the ethics of trying to get people to buy more unhealthy food, but as a marketing concept, it was a really simple and effective example of gamification. There's another, I'm just going to play a really short bit of video here, but just to set it up. Speed cameras, right? We have them here in California. We don't penalize people, but you do see those cameras and it tells you how fast you're going versus how fast you ought to be going. In Sweden and in other countries, they do fine you, they penalize you, they send you a ticket in the mail. But what they decided to do here was say, all right, we'll fine people if they're speeding, but we'll collect the money. The government's not going to keep it. We'll give the money. We'll photograph everybody, and anyone who's under the limit, we'll do a lottery, and you can win that money, right? So now people are incentivized for an activity that is not traditionally a game, right? Driving. I'll just play just the last little bit of this video.
The speed camera lottery would do two things. One, it would photograph speeders, give them a citation, and that money goes in a pot. But if you're obeying the law, your picture will also get snapped. You'll be entered into a lottery and win some of that money from those speeders.
Jag kör alltid lagligt, men tveksamt om man vinner.
Det är ju en bra positiv grej det där. Kör lagligt och tjäna deg, det är perfekt.
So I'll just pause that there. So I thought that was incredibly clever. Again, really simple, just gamifying an activity that's not gamified, and suddenly everyone's incentives change, right? So I want to just quickly look at one more example, and kind of a personal one, but it's this idea of not changing the task. It's the idea of adding gameplay to the task, and I want to, even though this isn't an education example, I want to start shifting our minds to education and the idea that we do ask students to do a lot of tasks that are individual, lonely, maybe not that exciting, but they need to do it, right? In some cases, there's not necessarily another way to kind of get the content to them, to get the knowledge that they need, right? And so with a thing like Strava here, I came late to running my life, but for various health reasons, I wanted to run, and it was an activity I could do, but it was boring, right? I hated it, absolutely hated it. And it only took me a month or so to figure out, right, I can track these runs, first of all, so I'm getting feedback and data all about myself, right? So about the run here. So, how fast I'm running, I can track my heart rate, all kinds of different things. And then there are all kinds of platforms like Strava that will analyze it for me, and suddenly I can see the distribution of my pace throughout different parts of the run, and I can really start to build up some data. But what for me, so there's a lot of apps that do this, and it's not that complicated. But for me, what Strava adds to it is this element of gamification. So for any particular run, they've broken it up into segments. And you can see when I highlight over these, some blue bits light up along my pathway on the map. And so each of these segments becomes its own little mini competition. So when I click on any of them, lots of people use Strava and track their runs, right? What we're doing is there's nothing lonelier than running alone, right? It's just one foot in front of the other, but lots of other people are out there running. And I can then go and say, hey, in my age group, how are others doing on this? Here are my recent efforts on this one stretch of the run. And here's everyone in my neighborhood. This is just one run I did. Well, actually, this is over all time. But I can sort of see where I am in the leaderboard, and I don't have to join anything. I don't have to do anything. It's just out there. It's part of the community. So that is incredibly motivating. I'll just show you one other thing, just because I think it's cool. It also has a feature. So this is for that same run on that exact day. There's me doing the run, and here's everyone else. Some of them are on bikes. Some of them are running.
Oh, that's crazy.
And I can actually see what happened on the day. This is one day in April of 2017. And I can actually remember, like, I noticed some of the people who passed me, and when I get home, I'm excited to come home and check and see who passed me. And then, so how fast was this person running? And I can click on that person. And what was kind of this lonely individual effort now is suddenly brought to life. Jonathan, and I can message him. I can become friends with him. I can ask my friends to join and compete against my friends. So, again, a really simple activity, but you can build out so much around it through the process of gamifying it, essentially.
This is only on the premium version, huh?
No, this part, sorry, the flybys are not. This is just like a beta thing. It's been like a labs project for many, many years, but this is free.
Okay.
At this level, most of this is free. I do pay for this. It's not very much. The segments, you can see all the segment stuff. The thing you miss some of the analysis. They don't do as deep. You don't get as many analytical tools on the free one, but it's still most of it on the free one, as most of these running apps are, and most of these are actually they do have sponsors. I believe this one's Adidas, so there is a corporate element to this. They are trying to. It's not all completely separated from the business world. Okay, so let's shift gears from kind of getting a good understanding of games and principles of gamification, and start looking at some examples specifically in education. So I talked about going big. I don't know if anyone's heard about this program from Ball State. But what Ball State decided to do is to gamify the university. So we're not just gamifying a course or an activity, but what they did was to look at, they initially rolled this out to students that were traditionally more at risk. So I believe it included Pell Grant students and perhaps some other definitions, but it's basically an app that you download. And if we think about new student orientation and students coming to campus from lots of different places, diverse backgrounds, this app basically gave them points for doing certain things, right? Finding the health center, finding out where different buildings are. You got different levels of points for doing this in groups. So grabbing your new roommate or grabbing people on your dorm room floor and going out and doing an activity together. They distribute out points. Remember, points, badges, leaderboard? It's just a really simple application of that. They built in grades to it. So if you got better grades, you get more points on that leaderboard. And you could use those points to buy swag at the bookstore and to buy snacks at different places. So you got rewarded for it. It was remarkably successful. They saw increases in student retention rates, increases in student satisfaction and GPAs among these at-risk student groups. So what do people think about? I don't know that much yet about our students and about their campus experience, having come into this during COVID. But what about something like this at Westcliff for the kind of diverse population we have?
One thing that I did on often when I was teaching the strategy courses, I brought in the old electronic version of Battleship, the online version, and split the students up into teams, and each one of those teams was one of the ship. They got to strategize and place their ship on the board, and then each group took turns firing at the computer ships.
Right, I see. So not playing against each other, but right, competing against a common enemy. Interesting. Yeah, and that also speaks to the idea that not all games are digital. They're not all happening on a platform. I didn't have time to build it in here, but there are a lot of ways now to use Lego. It's called Serious Lego, I think, and there's all kinds of pre-developed games around using Lego at tables to flesh out different concepts that are, have nothing to do with Lego, but they add that element of in-person, kind of physical hands-on gameplay, similar to what you were talking about, Professor Lipa. So also staying in the Go Big sphere, this was a course that was gamified. And it's actually at a previous workplace of mine. It's a microeconomics course, and the professors in charge of this course were absolutely convinced that all microeconomics is just a big game, right? It's all game theory and gameplay. And they thought, if we can gamify this entire course, really make it, not just gamify it, but make it a game, they became obsessed with this. And I'll just play you a quick overview of it. And we'll talk a little bit more about it.
Maybe the best way of teaching is through experiential learning. So if you are able to get the learning closer to reality, make it experiential, that kind of learning tends to stay with you much more than any theoretical learning that you could do.
We developed economics to be an introductory economics course that is virtually indistinguishable from a video game. In this game, students make choices that allow them to progress their society from a very simple economy up to really complex cities where they represent the government and make social welfare decisions. But in this journey, they actually fall in love with their society and they get to care about their learning.
I guess in my real life, I don't really often get to make economic decisions which impact a whole society or impact the livelihoods of other people, but economics is often about those kind of decisions. So this game was really helpful in allowing me to be in a situation where I was able to make those decisions.
So I just want to pause there. I won't play the whole thing, but that last comment from the student always really struck me. In my normal life, I don't get to make decisions that that impact people's economic welfare. So it's that really immersive experience of experiential learning. And what's also interesting about this course is that they developed a course-specific textbook that lives inside the game. So they actually interact with the textbook as part of the gameplay. And it's also notable that the game is kind of the backbone and spine of the course, but this is just part of the course outline. They still have lectures. They still have what is a very traditional microeconomics curriculum throughout it. It's just that everything that's not kind of the live face-to-face part is done entirely inside the game. There's also gamification here. So students are able to visit each other's worlds and see how other students have approached problems and how they're performing with each of the different topics as the weeks go by. And it gets back to that point I made earlier about so often education being a very lonely pursuit for students. They're asked to go off and just do things independently. And they don't know how others are doing, how others are approaching it, how much others have studied, how much others are learning, where do they sit in the group? And gamification to me is a lot about bridging that gap between making what are traditional individual activities less so to some extent. So that's gamifying, very much gaming and gamifying an entire course, right? You're making a whole world, like, I don't know if people have played things like SimCity or Civilization, or even things like Minecraft. Well, not so much Minecraft, but they're kind of first-person role-playing games where you make decisions and you see the impact of those decisions. Just shifting into the slightly more practical side, the idea of simulations. And who is anyone here using or has been using simulations in their teaching? See a couple of hands. To me, I think simulations are sometimes overlooked in the games and gamification sphere. We don't traditionally think of them as games, but from my perspective, they absolutely are. Right? They have all the same elements. The idea, if we go right back to this initial slide, one thing I didn't talk about was this idea of uncertainty and risk, and that's a big part of games. And that's what simulations can give us. It can give students the chance to engage in decision making and see the outcomes, right? It's that real world element. But for me, what can be very beneficial with simulations is that they don't necessarily involve spending 4 years making the course into an entire video game, right? You can integrate simulations very discreetly in a very targeted way to teach certain concepts. They don't have to take up a lot of time. They can be online. They can be an in-class activity, gaming activity. They can be done in teams. They can be done individually. One partner that I've worked a lot with is Harvard Business Publishing. I think they've kind of done a great job in building simulations kind of to the specifications that I was just describing, where they don't necessarily end up taking over the whole course. They're very easy. And this is where I want to talk a little bit about how we integrate games into our courses and into our teaching, because that's really important, right? It's a game, but if it's not integrated in a meaningful way in what you're doing, it's not going to be that impactful, right? At that point, it's more like an icebreaker activity. But with simulations like these, and I'll just bring up some, what are more or less screenshots, some of these. Basically, the gameplay of them is relatively straightforward, right? You've got a task. You're the strategic decision maker of a particular company. You get access to, lots of different data sets, right? And I don't even know what a lot of these mean, but you get to see all kinds of different data going on for this company, and you have to understand what this data means and then make some simple decisions based on this data. So when I click down to decisions here, you can see I've got what looks like a balance sheet. Now I have to decide where to invest different amounts of money based on all these different business inputs on the left side. So lots of different things can be taught in the one sim. There are lots of different simulations that kind of operate in a similar fashion to this. It's essentially providing business information and asking students to take on roles and make decisions. And then when you make the decision, all the data updates and changes. So sometimes it's year on year or quarter on quarter. So I make a decision in the first quarter of 2021, and then there are impacts from those decisions. What's happened to the company? What's happened to different divisions? And the way I like to embed these into courses is to run the simulation multiple times, maybe in week 2, maybe in week 4, maybe in week 6. And in between, you're teaching and reinforcing the concepts, and students are able to sort of see improvement and better understanding and better decision making in a simulation that maybe only takes 1 hour, 2 hours each time it's run. So I really like them as games. I think they tick a lot of boxes. You do end up with, from the instructor end, you get to see leaderboards and performance from different teams. So you get a lot of analytics about what students are understanding or not understanding. And sorry, just one more here. Students get to see their performance against other students. So they know when they're making these decisions, they are competing against their team, their peers and their class members as well. So I wanted to introduce these because they have great elements of gamification, but they're really accessible, right? they're possible, right? We're probably not going to be able to develop play economics for every single course here, but we can find good simulations and games to integrate in very targeted ways within courses. Okay, I want to end.
Can you give us the URL for that Harvard?
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat.
Okay.
What you can do, and what I have done, is you will have to apply for what's called an educator account. It's pretty straightforward. You fill in a form. They vet you. I think they just look at the website and say, yeah, that person's a professor, because they don't want students getting educator access and seeing too much. So they will vet you. And it takes maybe like overnight to get that done. Let me just pop that in the chat. And if you want to catch up with me and talk about it, because there's more than simulations here as well. There are kind of like just little interactive widgets that teach business concepts. There are a lot of good digital products now, where Harvard was traditionally known for its PDF case studies. To me, a simulation is like a case study come to life, right? It's a case study that the student gets to be the active participant in, not just passively sort of reading about a case study and maybe writing some reflections on it. It's a case study come to life, and I really like thinking about them that way. Okay, I wanted to wrap up on something pretty specific to us because we're using Moodle. Moodle has, so you might be thinking, okay, gamification, that sounds great, but how do I gamify something, right? Do I need a whole platform? Do I have to, go figure out how to do this? But Moodle actually has a plugin that allows you to relatively easily, but quite powerfully, gamify your Moodle site without necessarily making very many changes to how you do things, right? So I've got an example of this is our test Moodle server, so it's not on our production server where we really do our teaching. This is just a copy, if you will, of our live Moodle environment. And I've installed the plugin here. It's called Level Up. And you can see it just integrates itself as a block over here on the right. And there's some links down here about how I interact with it, but I'm just going to go into the settings, I guess, because we can see everything from the settings. And okay, so basically it creates a leaderboard inside your course, and it's all customizable. I don't have to call these 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't have to use stars. I can sort of name my levels. I can determine how many points get you to level up through each level. I can look at the ladder. So far, there's 2 other students here, but I haven't been able to log in as them. And like, this is a demo site with me kind of manipulating the data in the background. But myself as a student, I've got 206 points so far, just from things I've done in the Moodle site. So how does it work? How does it determine what I've done here? So there's an area here called rules. And I basically say, all right, you get X number of points when any of these things are done. And you get X number of points when any of these things are done. So it's basically a series of logical statements that involve pretty much anything you can do in a Moodle site. So I've given points even just for viewing the course. So how many times do you come into the Moodle site, right? I could give points for maybe I pull elements of the syllabus out, and I give points just for engaging with making sure that students have read those parts of the syllabus, and maybe they've done it multiple times. I've given points for their participation in discussion forums, and for doing the questionnaires, and for submitting their assignments. I can, not in this version, you do have to pay a little bit for an upgrade, but you can give points for grades. So giving them, I mean, they already have incentive to get good grades, but this can contribute to their position on the leaderboard. I've built in some new activities here. I've created a wiki as an activity in this course. So I want students to all contribute to this growing body of documentation and knowledge in the course. And I've given them points for participating in that. I might think about creating some other activities where they have to go out as a team and figure something out and bring it back and make some posts about that. And they get, maybe these are extra points. It's not necessarily a graded activity in the course, but I'm giving them some extra things to do, and they can chase leaderboard points in doing that. I think this is actually a really well developed plugin. Some of them are not always that smartly developed, but this is really sort of pretty tightly done and ticks off everything that I would expect from a plugin like this. And it doesn't necessitate that we, do this all in a different platform and spend a ton of money, building something out and completely upending what we do. It kind of works in conjunction with what we're already doing. Right, so I want to end my talking there. I'm right on about where I hope to be time-wise. I've thrown a lot of different examples and elements at you. I kind of want to turn it over to you guys and get your interpretations or experience or thoughts on this whole side of education.
I have a question.
Sure.
So where's there? I go back and forth because personally I love games. I love fun stuff. Like it's just very motivating for me. But I also know that there are people who are the opposite spectrum of that. And so in past things, and you had the Strava as an example. I have a Fitbit. There's been like a group of us who two of us are going like for dropping everything else responsibility wise in the world just to get these steps in. And then at the other end, they just gave up because they're like, now there's no way to win because we can't beat that person anymore. It just becomes a give up. So like when you look at something like that, the Moodle plugin, and it's just like, of course that's for basic things, but there's that point where people will just give up too. How do you find the balance between like those who do too much and more than they need to versus those who just are like, well, they've got it already. I don't need to join in.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's kind of the point I made about Monopoly right at the start, right? It's over. I'm no longer interested. I suppose it's in the design, right? You could have rewards that don't necessitate necessarily being the top person or it's probably the trickiest part of it, right? And in fact, I didn't show it in that app, in that plugin, but there is an element they've tried to, I'm not sure how successful it would be, but they've tried to build in a way to combat just cheating. Like basically, when we talk about gamification, there's also this idea that, and it happens with things like Harvard simulations as well. Students find a way to game the system. And so those things are hard to guard against. I guess my advice on that is to think a lot about incentives, right? If we incentivize cheating, for lack of a better word, if we incentivize certain behaviors in the game, it's going to happen. So we have to guard against those, I suppose. And some of it's like you said, making it goes back to that intrinsic. Sorry, I dropped out for a second. Goes back to that intrinsic motivation, where someone wants to do something because it's fun, not because they're just chasing a number. That whole idea of PBL, points, badges, and leaderboards. I mentioned that there's some negative interpretation of that, and that negative interpretation does speak to what you're saying, quite specifically, where if they're just chasing points or a badge, have we changed things that much, or have we just shifted it from a grade to total points? So a lot of it's about the activities, and the gamification really just supports participation in those activities. But definitely the hardest part of it is to solve, for sure. Has anyone else sort of used any specific games, or I brought up here? There's a whole bunch of other. I talked about this Lego method. There are things like Quizlet and Kahoot and other things that just kind of quickly challenge students to get involved in game-like play. Do we know of much of that going on here or at other places where you've taught? probably been a big challenge the last year in particular to try to engage students in new ways.
A lot of people use Kahoot still. And then also Pear Deck has the different interactive, somewhat like, you could have some games, but it's more of like interactive slides rather than games, but you could make it you could probably gamify that very easily.
What's that called? Pear Deck?
Pear Deck, it's a Google or Slides add-on.
To Google Slides. Okay. I feel like I've heard of that, but I haven't specifically used it. Has anyone else specifically used games in education or been a student where games were used?
Yeah, when I was in business school, we did for marketing class, they did Markstrat. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Yeah, I've seen that one.
Yeah, so
is that more immersive? Like, how much of the course was based around Markstrat?
No, it's not like immersive. It's just like an assignment. It's a project basically.
Okay.
It took a couple of weeks, and then the students, the group presented the results. So you play the game for a couple of weeks, and then it's one of the, I'm not sure it's like a final presentation. It's one of the final presentations or like a big presentation though for the. So it's like, I would say like at least like almost like half or 40% of the classes, like whatever. So it's pretty. Yeah, it's. I remember it was so long ago, and I still remember it because it was fun. And I was like,
did you like it?
Yeah, I liked it. That's why I remember. It was like, it was from a long time ago.
I was thinking.
I still remember. So, well, I was the one in the group that did most of the game playing because like, everybody was busy, right? So like, I just kind of did it. So I remember it myself very, very clearly. I remember you had to pay like $50 though. For a login or something. And then,
that's always a challenge. Like there is, I didn't talk much about money, but sometimes that can be a challenge, and particularly if you want to do something big that involves full investment by the university rather than investment in a single. They
made the students pay for that. So
yeah, well, it's like buying a textbook. To be honest, it's like buying something hopefully better than a textbook.
Yeah.
You probably don't remember many of your textbooks, but you do remember Markstrat, which is telling.
For the Harvard one, I noticed there were costs on those. Is that just for the professor and then the students play free, or?
No, it's per student.
Per student.
So it's very similar to what David just said about, and it's approximately, I think it's approximately the same cost. Some of them are less than others. I guess depending on the
one thing to just put out there, of course, like the games or these kinds of things do have a cost with it, but even the word game can rub people the wrong way. And especially when we have students from around the world, they think game is childlike, or that word has a negative connotation to different individuals. So the framing, especially if there is a price involved, the framing and buy-in needs to be created. And that comes from the professor, because if we're using it to play a game, then we know what we're doing and they're just playing a game and it's used to use time. But if there is value to that, and there is value in the gamification, I mean, it's working across industries. We know that, but that buy-in has to be there of setting it up like, yes, this is a game, but this is what you're going to get from that in order to be successful with that. Or if not, people are just, oh, I just play a game. I don't do anything in that class. So the framing is really critical with students, especially adult learners.